Good afternoon, this is Force 13 Live, 3 minutes past 12 UTC, and look at that, another fine day here at Force 13 HQ. My name's Nathan Foy, and I'm going to be talking about what the current situation is in the world of storms at this hour, as we do rather regularly on the live streaming service. If you have any questions for me, incidentally, do send it a message on the comments section of the streaming page. Temperature just ticking over to 70 Fahrenheit here at Force 13 HQ, which is rather nice. I'll be certainly out in it this afternoon, but hey, let's go on to talk about what's going on storm-wise. So the first thing I want to show you, if I can just grab it here, is, well, first of all, this is what the forecast looked like last night for this system A6. Which I designated, which was likely to become a tropical storm and impact Florida as a tropical storm quite potentially. Well, let's see how much that forecast has changed with the latest forecast that has just come out on the Force 13 website. The actual page for this is force13.com/ECMWF, which stands for the Storm Early Warning Service, which details track forecasts for storms that have not yet formed and storms that have gone post-tropical. So this is labelled A6, which could become Tropical Storm Colin very soon. It's certainly on the cards on the forecast there. Overnight, the system's travelled towards the northwest, a few flare-ups here and there, and it's sort of getting its act together in a way. Though I'm not exactly sure on what exactly it means yet until at least we get visible imagery. It should be around now, actually. So if I do get some visible imagery for you later, I will show that. But here we are. 12 hours time, it will still be lingering around that area. Its pressure right now is 1008 millibars. Its wind speed is approximately 20 miles per hour. We expect it will become a tropical depression just off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. That could be as soon as 48 hours, and then it's going to move towards the north and develop into potentially Tropical Storm Colin. I know that Devon was talking on his stream last night about how it may not even be tropical at that point, but either way it should have tropical storm force winds and then move off towards the northeast, and at the moment it's hinting towards a landfall just north of Tampa, but it could be feasibly anywhere from just about the Florida border with Alabama and very much the southern part of mainland Florida. The Keys, I think, just about out of it now, but it's very, very edgy there, so pretty much the whole of Florida should be watching this just in case we get a tropical storm. Now, we did mention yesterday the possibility, some people more than others mentioned the possibility of a hurricane out of this system. That's looking less likely by the hour. One of the models yesterday, the NavGem, did predict that this system would become a significant hurricane after moving over Cuba and affecting the Florida Keys, the Upper Keys in particular, and possibly the Miami area as a hurricane. That NavGem model is the final model to have shifted west, and now all models, as far as I know, are calling for this system to move either through the Yucatan Channel or over the Yucatan Peninsula itself, and I don't believe that any of them predict a hurricane or anything close to that anymore. This forecast map on Force 13 shows that the system will have a peak wind speed of approximately 45 or 50 miles per hour. With a landfall intensity of 40 miles per hour and weakening thereafter and turning post-tropical as it emerges off the other side of Florida as it moves off towards the northeast. So that's the situation on A6. Now we also have, of course, Tropical Depression Bonnie, which is still alive, and that has not yet become a tropical storm again. It is still forecasted, but I'm not sure at this stage whether it will manage to do that or not. We'll see, and we'll try and get some floater imagery up on that very soon. But I've just noticed that the NHC have also updated their news as well, because they do it at the same time around midday UTC. And for this system that we're looking at here, they've got a 10% chance in the next 48 hours. I'd say it's higher. 60% chance in the next 5 days. I'd say that is sort of okay, because it's still not certain. But I would raise the 48-hour chance to around 30%, I would imagine, in the next 2 days. And that is for tropical cyclone formation, not tropical storm formation. Those percentages are for tropical depression or higher. We also have Invest 91E in the Eastern Pacific. Let me just get the latest on that for you. And 91E has got a wind speed of, I believe, 30 miles per hour. It's still looking, well, it's touch and go as to whether it will become a tropical storm or not. The HWRF, which usually is very bullish, again, is being very tame, I suppose, in predicting this storm, saying only a 40 mile per hour storm. Yesterday it said it would only be a tropical depression. The day before it said a weak tropical storm, so very interesting and consistent. The GFDL, which sometimes blows up everything in the East Pacific in particular, is saying 60 miles per hour. And 3 variations of the ship's model are still going crazy over the storm as well, varying between 65 and 80 miles per hour for Invest 91E. I would say that is extremely unlikely. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do any screen shares, so I'm only able to tell you what I'm seeing on the screen, apart from this particular image that you're seeing right now. But I'm looking at the other models elsewhere. The GFS, let me talk about what the GFS predicts in terms of everything in the Atlantic and Pacific. So Bonnie will move off towards the east, pretty much following the NHC track, and doesn't look like it will intensify at all. Invest 91E won't form anytime soon, though there is the possibility that it will form on around day 4 or 5 as it sinks a little bit further south, around 10-9 degrees north, which is only just about the same as it is right now, but we're expecting just a little bit of a northward movement, or west-northwest, just north of west over the next 2 or 3 days, and then just sinking to the south. That little bit again could make all the difference. And then I think we will have a tropical storm on day 5, 6, maybe 7 out of 91E. And that is way out over the Eastern Pacific, not far from 140 degrees west, which is the official border between the Eastern Pacific and the Central. So let's take a look at what could become Colin as well. So the GFS has something over the Yucatan Peninsula on day 3. It seems to be attached to something, then becomes its own, and looks like it will become a weak tropical storm Colin, pretty much following the forecast that you see on there, but it looks rather unlikely that it will even be a tropical storm at landfall according to the GFS, and the track forecast is pretty much the same as what I'm showing here. That's only one model though. There are plenty more. Let's take a look at the CMC, which is usually crazy when it comes to Atlantic development more than anything, but let's take a look. The CMC says that Bonnie will move towards the east, pretty much exactly the same, and here we are. Rather interesting. So the CMC predicts 2 storms in the Eastern Pacific, one of those being 91E, developing into a tropical storm within 48 hours. And then moving off towards the west, though not getting beyond tropical storm status. And then the CMC, oh that's interesting, also predicting Blas in the East Pacific, and that is going to be a deeper storm, I think. Looks compact and deep, and could be a moderate, maybe high-end tropical storm that does make landfall not far from where Barbara made landfall in 2013 in Mexico, quite far east. But what you want to know is what the CMC predicts in the Atlantic, and this is rather interesting. So Colin will form on day 3, according to the CMC. This is just one model, and moves off towards the north into the Gulf of Mexico, becomes a hurricane, and makes landfall along the bend of Florida there, near the Panhandle, on around day 4, at the end of day 4 into day 5, and will turn post-tropical around then, but will still be significant as it carries along the Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina coast on day 5 into day 6, moving off towards the east, blowing up massively to below 980 millibars, and then off towards the northeast, and could be around 970 when it becomes a significant extratropical cyclone and whacks Newfoundland on day 6 or 7. But what's more is that behind that, the CMC is also predicting another tropical storm in the Atlantic, in the Gulf of Mexico, following in the footsteps of Colin, making landfall pretty much directly over Tampa at the end of day 6, and then becoming a hurricane in the Western Atlantic, and at the end of the run, turning towards the east, and it looks like high pressure might have its handle on it, but that is very, very speculative, and I don't want to say any more, because that is one model that is known to be quite spectacular when it comes to blowing everything up, and that it certainly has done in that run that I was just looking at. So the ECMWF, which usually puts more reason into the forecasts, the ECMWF thinks that Bonnie will survive as a distinguishable system into 72 hours, so that's not to say it will be tropical for that long, it won't. It does also say that 91E will become at least a tropical depression, it will be short-lived, and it also says that Colin will form and will strike Florida, very similar to what the track forecast says on the Force 13 map in front of you, and then moves out and turns post-tropical over the Gulf Stream on day 5. So the ECMWF sounds rather realistic to me. The GFDL, let's see what that says on the system. Because it's not an invest yet, it's rather difficult. But the GFDL does say that this system will become, let's see, I think it will turn post-tropical before it reaches tropical storm force winds. It's rather interesting, this, because it will make landfall in Florida. It doesn't look particularly impressive. Tropical depression at best, might not even be tropical, and then gains the tropical storm force winds after that as it skirts up the US East Coast and then moves beyond. So that's interesting. The HWRF, just going to see what that says. So the HWRF says that, first of all, Bonnie will become a tropical storm again. Will lose tropical storm status at around 62 degrees west, at which point it'll still be at 35 degrees north. I don't think Bermuda will have any issues if that was to be the case, but that's unlikely anyway. And then behind it has a rather disorganized Colin becoming a tropical storm, making landfall in Florida on the Panhandle Bend, and then off towards the northeast, turning post-tropical, and the HWRF looks like it will be giving Newfoundland a bit of a punch there as well, just like the which other model said it was at CMC. And the NavGem, which was predicting a lot yesterday. In fact, I don't think that's updated, so there's nothing new to tell you about the NavGem other than it's shifted west, in that a storm will form and move through the Yucatan Channel. I think the NavGem is the only model that actually thinks that the storm will form before it enters the Gulf of Mexico, because it looks to me like it does say that it will become a tropical storm before then, but as it is only a area of interest, a tropical disturbance. And there it is, A6, right in front of you. That's the Force 13 tracking map, one of our graphics. You can find that and other information on force13.com/sews.html. This is Force 13 live, and 3 storms that we may be tracking very soon, if we're not tracking Tropical Storm Bonnie. Looking around the rest of the world, last time I checked, it's predicting virtually nothing. though there is a little possibility for that Invest 95S in the South Indian Ocean if it's still going. Let me just verify that it is. In fact, the Navy have taken it off, but it was looking rather interesting last night during Devon's show. But it appears that the South Indian Ocean is finished for this season. And of course, the rollover of the new year in the storm records, at least in the southern hemisphere, will happen at the end of this month. And of course, if you remember last year, Raquel formed over the course of that new year at the end of June 30th and lasted into the first days of July over the Solomon Islands. I was looking at the stats, the facts last night. I mentioned it on air that there were two years in a row there were July storms in 1997 and 1998. Devon was talking about the possibility of having 2 June storms in a row. Doesn't look like it will come from 95S, but we've still got July as well, of course, because Raquel survived into July. But interestingly, 1997-98 had 2 instances in those years where there was a tropical storm that formed. But what I noticed after that is that 1996 had exactly the same thing, another one. So that was 3 years in a row where there was a July storm in the South Indian Ocean and Southern Hemisphere, of course. But the interesting thing about 97-98 is that was also El Nino, so coming out of an El Nino in 98, of course, so there's still that possibility that we could see some activity there. And if you missed my climatological information, the West Pacific, of course, has been very quiet this year, and some people might be surprised by that, but I certainly am not, because in the past years, 1973, 1983 and 1998, all coming off big El Ninos like this year, the West Pacific didn't have any storm activity until at least late June, and in the case of 1998, the latest start on record, early July. So that is a distinct possibility, and we're almost there already. So it's certain that the West Pacific is going to have a very late start, and possibly in the top 5 latest starts on record in the West Pacific. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be a dead season, because the West Pacific, in all 3 of those years, the first 3 storms were weak. And in all 3 of those years, the 4th storm was a Category 3 or higher. So, I wonder if that will draw any parallels again this year. Well, I don't think there's anything else to discuss in the terms of storms right now. So let me go on to that climatology a little bit more and tell you what I'm predicting or expecting based on climatology and a little bit of common sense here and there as well. And those Atlantic viewers, let's show you this. This is a map, and in a moment it will be sized properly as well. Force 13 HQ in the background. A lovely day here, by the way. You can see the odd plane going by every once in a while. So this is the map in front of us in the Atlantic. This is for chances of major hurricane conditions in 2016. That's Category 3 or higher. And as you can see, the island of Hispaniola is in the biggest trouble this year, with I think that's a 60% chance of a Category 3 landfall, or experiencing Category 3 conditions. Just a little bit less in the Bahamas, in Puerto Rico, in the northern Lesser Antilles. And I think what we're going to see this year is a blend of 1998 and 2010. 1998 had a lot of storms that sort of tracked through. Well, certainly Georgia's hit absolutely everything in sight, didn't it? Had a few storms forming out to sea as well. And 2010, as many people will remember, had quite a few storms in the Atlantic, which sort of went near the US East Coast, but not quite. I think it will be a 2010, but a little bit further west. And I think we will get a few Caribbean storms. We may also have a little shades of 1988 as well this year, potentially, with, let's not say it with too much certainty, there could be potential of a Category 5, maybe like Gilbert, at least in track, if not in intensity. Of course, Gilbert, the second strongest storm ever in the Atlantic. So that's for Category 3 conditions, and just making a note there of the US coast as well. Around 30% chances for quite a bit of the US coast. Eastern Florida more at risk than the Western Florida. The Gulf Coast east of New Orleans to Florida is at the most risk. Louisiana just a little bit less there, and Texas could possibly be at risk of a significant storm. I would imagine it would be in South Texas rather than towards Houston, but that is rather speculative. And the western coast, the eastern coast of Mexico, Gulf of Mexico coast, may also have some trouble this year, maybe. But these are just indicative. It's by no means set in stone, and the year brings a lot of things. So let's take a look at hurricane strength. This is for any hurricane, Category 1 plus in the North Atlantic this year. So again, the chances up to 100%. 80% chances for many areas of the Caribbean there. Hispaniola, Cuba, the Bahamas, and the coast of Mexico, from the Veracruz area north to the Texas border. High chance of hurricane conditions. There you can see that Texas coast has a little bit of a less chance, so maybe you get the odd storm or two that could be rather strong. But Florida in particular is probably going to lose its hurricane clean record, and Bermuda has a significant chance of hurricane activity this year as well, because I'm expecting quite a few storms, as well as moving through the Caribbean and the islands, quite a few storms to go out to sea. But of course Bermuda is out to sea and may also have problems. The northern part of the Lesser Antilles, also another area of concern for hurricanes, and the eastern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula at some point during this year, this summer into fall, will have a distinct possibility, 50% chance of hurricane conditions, as will Jamaica. And of course, going up the US East Coast, as far as the Outer Banks, a significant chance. Beyond the Outer Banks, a less chance, so it's less likely that we'll see systems like Irene and Sandy, but it could be more likely that we'll see systems maybe like Fran, perhaps, in 1996. But let's move on to any tropical storms at all, and the whole thing is lighting up. Nearly a 100% chance for the Bahamas. South Carolina already has been proven, 80% chance is verified, and pretty much the whole of the Gulf of Mexico coast is almost nailed on to receive a tropical storm, as you would expect. But I guess this is more indicative for areas that don't always experience tropical storm activity. So you're looking there at Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, looking at significant chances of at least a tropical storm landfall, or a possibility of conditions of tropical storm strength this year. We could be seeing a season similar to 2010, which of course had Earl and Igor, Igor in particular causing big problems to Newfoundland. We could see storms like that this year. But there you are, tropical storm conditions. But it looks like the New England area is going to be the safest place on the Atlantic coast to be this year, unless you live in Panama or somewhere like that never gets storms ever, except from that significant storm in 1969. So there's the Atlantic. Let's move on to other places. The only other place I've looked at properly is the West Pacific, and this is what it looks like. So West Pacific viewers, now this is chances of Category 3 typhoon conditions in 2016. So you can see on the image there, 5% chance in Tokyo, 10% chance in South Korea, but a 30% chance in Kyushu in Japan, a significant chance, higher than average, of a Category 3 landfall there. And there's the key points on the right hand side. An above chance of typhoon activity in Japan. That includes its islands, its offshore islands, like the Ryukyu Islands chain. an increased possibility of a Category 5 landfall in the Philippines from Samar northwards to Luzon. I'm thinking of a system that could be like Meggy for a landfall in the Philippines this year, though it is unlikely that we'll see many storms this year. Of course, 2010 was the quietest season on record, yet still had a Category 5 that made landfall at peak intensity nearly. Decreased chances of major typhoons forming east of 150 east, and that sort of helps me tell you what to expect in the Central Pacific as well. I think it's very unlikely that we'll see much activity in the Central Pacific this year. People are used to seeing lots of activity, but I think it could be almost dead, if not zero, storms in the Central Pacific unless some move in from the Eastern Pacific. And an increased chance of South China Sea activity, though only average chances of a major typhoon landfall on South China Sea coast. What has been noticed during the research for this is that the climatological conditions favour tropical storms forming in the South China Sea, but what we've seen with many analogous storms is that they have all weakened substantially before making a landfall in Vietnam or in China, though sticking out like a sore thumb there is the island of Hainan with a 15% chance of Category 3 conditions, and Hong Kong with a 25% chance, which is rather interesting. So that possibility is still there, but it is actually only average chances of a major typhoon landfall on the coast. But particularly speaking about Vietnam, I think it's going to be rather unlikely that we'll see significant activity there this year. It looks like storms are going to weaken before landfall, but I may be wrong, and you can never take this too lightly. 5% it still is. As far as Guam's concerned, we didn't do these maps last year, but I can guarantee it would have been a much higher number. But 35% chance of a Category 3 landfall there this year, 30% chance in the Northern Mariana Islands. The southern part of the Philippines, where Haiyan hit, a 20% chance there this year. It probably would have been higher in 2013 had we been doing these graphics. And 5% chance in southern Mindanao, which is sort of what you'd expect most years. 5% chance or less, because they are very rare. And looking further west to Palawan, again a 5% chance, which suggests that most storms will make landfall further north in the Philippines this year, and we probably won't see anything like Haiyan or wasn't there another storm last year that passed through that area? Significant storm? I can't remember now. It wasn't Melor, that was further north, but we could possibly see a system like Melor too. But the northern part of the Philippines may well be in trouble. 70% chance of a Category 3 landfall there this year. And the final graphic I can show you is 2016 danger areas as a whole in the Northern Hemisphere. So this includes sea areas in which you can see the chances of Category 3 hurricane or typhoon conditions in all those areas. And there we are. So moderate chances in the central Gulf of Mexico, moderate chances along the east coast of Florida into the Carolinas, moderate chance in the Bahamas, moderate chance in eastern Cuba, Hispaniola, and for much of the Caribbean Sea itself, in the central and eastern part of it. And also out to sea north of Puerto Rico, sort of like the patch where storms were intensifying all the time in 2010, where we had Danielle, Earl, Igor to a degree. Quite a few storms in 2010 and 11 that intensified there. I think we'll see that again this year. As far as the Eastern Pacific's concerned, it's looking to be a narrow channel of possibility there. And there is a small chance of Hawaii getting hit this year. But as you can see, very minimal chance of Category 3 hurricane or typhoon conditions, not even low chances beyond Hawaii, and I think that will apply equally to weaker storms as well. I think beyond Hawaii there's going to be very little chance of tropical cyclone development, but again I could be wrong, but it appears that it may end up being that way. So the Eastern Pacific, it looks as though there is a small chance of Category 3 hurricane conditions not far from where Barbara and Pauline were, but it looks as though most of the Eastern Pacific activity will be out to sea in terms of major hurricanes. I've not done much research into weaker storms per se, but there's always a possibility of a Mexican landfall, though I think it won't be such a bad year in the Eastern Pacific because we'll probably have much lower storms than what we've seen recently. The West Pacific, as you can see, the Philippine Sea is going to be the massive hotspot. Climatologically, over the years it is, but this year especially, I think we're going to see several major typhoons, Category 3 or higher, including at least one Category 5 in that area, and one or two may progress into the South China Sea by passing through the Philippine-Taiwan Strait. The southernmost Japanese Ryukyu Islands may also be a big threat, and apart from that, it's mainly out to sea areas in the sort of subtropical latitudes out to sea. We're looking at possibilities there, but as you can see towards the eastern part of the West Pacific, extremely low chances of seeing a major. The Indian Ocean, there's a small chance. You may remember when we had Ranu, that once or twice the models were predicting a significant cyclone, Category 3 perhaps, but that did not materialise. Could still materialise by the end of the year. Usually we get one or two early season storms and maybe one or two later ones, so it could happen around October, which seems to be the going month for significant storms, but it always pays to be looking out no matter what time of year it is if you're living over there. And a very small chance in the Arabian Sea. If we're going to compare it to 2010, in 2010 of course we had a significant storm in the Arabian Sea. Gonu, it wasn't Gonu, it was Fet, sorry. Gonu was 2007. Fet, which was a Category 4 in the Arabian Sea. So that's the Category 3 conditions there, and for those of you just joining us, I'm probably going to wrap up in just a few moments because there isn't too much else to talk about, but we'll bring you back to the latest tracking map for what we've designated as System A6, an area of interest in the Atlantic, which could well become Tropical Storm Colin. That's what we're predicting at the moment. We're predicting that it could become a tropical depression in 48 hours around the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula and then off into the Gulf of Mexico, and then making landfall potentially just north of Tampa, but there is still a lot of doubt about that, and indeed whether the system will even be tropical. You can find out more information on the Force 13 website, force13.com, and the actual page for this graphic here, force13.com/SEWS, which stands for SEWS.html, which stands for the Storm Early Warning Service, which will publish updates on yet to be tropical cyclones in the Atlantic and post-tropical cyclones in the Atlantic as well, in a particular area extending from 60 degrees west to 10 degrees east and 30 degrees north to 67 degrees north. Temperature Force 13 HQ is 70 degrees Fahrenheit still, as it has been for the whole hour, so I think I'm going to go out there and enjoy it. This has been Force 13 Live, and we're going to leave you with the view outside, which is a very pleasant one indeed. And that's all for now. If you've got any questions on the stream, even when we're not actually talking, you can send it in, and we'll get back to you at the most convenient time. And if we are not talking about it, we'll reply to you in text. That's our courtesy on the Force 13 live streaming service. Have a great day.